What's going on, folks? Running it back with another replay, and it's been a while since I've done just a little one-off cast, a little battle report, but we're running in here with a pretty interesting matchup. Dark Elves versus Khorne has always been one that's been pretty eye-catching. It's a little bit Khorne favored, I would say. But the Dark Elves certainly have some really good tools. Scourge Runner Chariots being probably one of the better ones that they've got access to. These chariots with their missile strength and good range are a pretty decent answer to Skull Cannons. As well as the Infantry and Lords even, particularly against like the Exalted Bloodthirster, who I did bring here. Just really enjoying playing around with this guy. Pretty decent option, honestly. Can struggle sometimes for sure. But especially against factions that can bring big dragon characters, I honestly do find the Exalted Bloodthirster to be pretty competitive. Just because of the ability to get in there with Deathbringer and just do huge damage with that. And it's very good at counter-diving anything trying to jump on the double skull cannon. Valkia is very similar. She can do a lot of the same stuff, but a little bit less durable. Just because she's got a much smaller HP pool. And against the Dark Elves, that can be really tough. Because Spirit Leech, while there is spell resistance for Khorne, it still does about 400 to 500 damage to her each cast. It's a very cheap spell. It can really pile up on her, and Valkia can really struggle if there's good combat characters available for the Dark Elves, like Malice, out on the field. There's also the Bloodbrack Medusa. Lots of very annoying units that this Dark Elf player is bringing out, and getting a little bit of a value lead on me while the top is being pushed by the Bleak Swords. We've got some Cold One Dread Knights in the forest here. My opponent splitting up the army quite a bit, getting a little bit of a ticket lead early, taking the number 2. I'm going to cap up the number 1 here, taking the number 2 as well. And my opponent doesn't really have anything on the low ground here to buffer out these Fleshhounds jumping on the Medusa. Medusas are quite slow. Not to say that 58 speed is terrible, but it definitely is leaving it very vulnerable without any support and cover right now. So, seeing an opportunity, grab the Fleshhounds, dive in on top of the Bloodbrack Medusa. You can see it sweeping there with the giant spear it's got. Such a cool monster. Really cool animations of that poor little Fleshhound going down there, being banished back to the warp, but giving time for Exalted Bloodthirster to get in here. Popping Deathbringer, get a huge swing in, but hitting Malice instead, actually, but you can see how much damage it did to him. Taking about 600 HP off of him. Getting damage on him early is pretty nice, because it forces Zarkan form out early. You don't want to leave Malice overly healthy when you see him on the battlefield, just because if he sticks around for a long time, he can get a lot of value with his abilities. They're quite strong. He's got some good leadership debuffs that he can pop, and you can see the Demon's Curse going down right now and really messing with the Fleshhound's leadership, as well as the Exalted Bloodthirster's melee defense. But we do manage to push back the Bloodbrack Medusa, that Deathbringer ability, just so damn strong. And this Medusa's, it's got 6,400 HP, which ain't bad. A little on the low side, though, and it forces my opponent to commit a ton of stuff into the middle here. Khorngors and Fleshhounds catching one of the other Cold One Knights. The Fleshhounds so far haven't really been doing a whole lot besides being mass, but they're giving opportunities for the rest of the army to trade value very well. That's oftentimes the best thing they can do if there's lots of heavily armored targets on the field. You know, sometimes Fleshhounds just aren't there for the damage. They're really there so that your other units can do well. Like 1,300 on the Exalted Bloodthirster already. These Khorngors have taken a significant chunk of HP off of some of the Cold One Knights here. One of them basically dead. These Cold One Dread Knights also trapped up now. Skull Cannons finding the Harganeth Executioners, a very fun pick. Gonna struggle horrendously, though. The Skull Cannons have been pretty nice. They've poked the Scourge Runners a little bit. Now they're really bullying the elite Dark Elf Infantry. My opponent trotting out quite a bit here, trying to get up on the points. One Scourge Runner dives in, trying to peel for the Dread Knights. and the Cold One Knights not having a very good time of it. Chaos Warriors intercepting Bleak Swords on their way down from the high ground. Another Bleak Sword trying to trot their way onto the low ground as well. Exalted Bloodthirster's taking a lot of damage. Fighting Malice, though, and forcing Zarkan out early, which is honestly pretty nice. He's going to be damaging himself this entire time now. He does, of course, have the Warp Sword of Cain, which obviates a lot of the passive damage that the Demon form causes him. You can see here, pretty equivalent in the terms of heals versus the damage done over time. But, nonetheless, just giving myself the opportunity to be able to finish him later in the game is going to be pretty damn nice. Medusa has rallied, gets a really good shot off on my poor Chaos Warriors, who are taking a lot of damage. But the Exalted Bloodthirster, yet again, finding an opportunity to land on her. There are Dread Knights here rallying. Not that many of them, though, so I should be able to push out of here. Is definitely a little bit risky, but the other elements of the battlefield are going quite nicely for me. Scourge Runner Chariots going down here. Just charging them down and locking them in place with the Marauder Horsemen. You can see here, surrounding them, forcing them to have to fight the Khorngors and the Skull Cannons, which are all very good tools for killing these low melee defense units. And the Skull Cannons firing in here, getting some good damage on the Cold One Knights as they're trying to get in. Spirit Leech going down, Skull Cannons starting to take quite a bit of damage, and my opponent definitely surging in here pretty nicely. Overextending a bit with the Marauder Horsemen, making a little bit of a mistake sending them that far up. But baiting in the remaining Dread Knights into the Khorngors. Harpies coming out. Harpies really not that good of an option here. But I do believe that my opponent brought them just to try and shut down the throwing axes as much as possible. This is an amazing unit for Khorne. They've been doing really well here also. They've already paid for themselves. Another breath attack going down from the Bloodthirster, and this is a very underrated ability. You can use it pretty quickly, rack up a lot of kills with your guy. He can land and get some terror routes and stuff. You can see some terror routes going on the very depleted Bleak Sword here. Not before the Chaos Warriors break. They haven't really gotten their value back, but they held for quite a while. Kept units off of the points here. Malice finding his way onto the Skull Cannons, getting some good damage. Just an absolute brawl of a game right now. Harganeth Executioners finally getting into a good fight and starting to grind back a little bit of value with the Khorngors breaking, unfortunately, here, right as I pop Horn of Khorne on them. But the Bloodletters are at least hanging in pretty decently. Their leadership's barely hanging on here. They do start to crumble out now. Just unfortunate that they're a little bit isolated. If the Khorngors had not terror routed there, it would have been a much better fight for me. But my opponent doing a very good job of starting to scrap back in here. But the Medusa gets intercepted yet again and takes a big shot from the Exalted Bloodthirster. 2,500 value on the big boy. It might not seem it, but just very powerful in early game scenarios where you just need to take down big monsters or annoying units in general. The terror is also really nice, particularly against factions that bring lots of chaff, just because you can, like I said, use the breath attacks, dive in with the good damage that he provides, and bomb stuff off the battlefield pretty nicely. Blood Beasts coming out, linking up with these very tattered Khorngors and providing some really solid mass. The Cold One Knights tried to just run over the Khorngor unit. The Blood Beasts, though, linked up just in time to be able to intercept them, and the Cold One Knights go down really hard there with the help of the Khorngors, who have gotten great value in that particular fight, while Marauder Horsemen fighting some Harpies here, going to do a pretty good job of chewing through those guys. I did pop a Relentless Rage on the lowish Marauder Horseman unit just to keep them in combat as long as possible, not lose as many models, and try to grind down this Harpy unit, while I send another Bloodletter forward to try and kill the Harganeth Executioners, which is going really nicely. Hounds of the Blood Hunt cleaning up some Bleak Swords and doing some really great damage there, keeping that objective mine for quite a while, and the Skull Cannons barely hanging on with their leadership. Very depleted, but still getting some great value, just wrecking the Harganeth Executioners, while the Bloodletters help to hold them in place and give the Skull Cannons time to wear these guys out. Harganeth Executioners can beat Bloodletters. It's a pretty even trade. And for my opponent, you know, having the Sorceress of Death here which did cast a Fate of Buna on these guys, really helped to turn that fight pretty favorably for my opponent, but a lot of other stuff is going quite badly right now. Skull Cannons find their way into a pretty good situation. The Cold One Knights are doing some decent damage, but the Blood Beasts, coupled with this Khorngor unit that's out on the field, yet another one, only brought a couple. I like to limit the number of Khorngors I have. I think they're a very solid unit. But I do think that there's some vulnerabilities that they've got that especially factions like the Dark Elves and High Elves and good shooting factions can take advantage of. The low armor, mediocre leadership, and just the fact that they have a very loose formation means that they can get run over by good mobility. They can get cycle charged down pretty badly. With the Blood Beasts, though, and the Skull Cannons to lock stuff in place, they've been doing it very nicely, though. Good value out of both of the units that I brought in. Marauder Horsemen also getting some great value, and my opponent's momentum really starting to fade now. More Blood Beasts coming out on the field with some Hounds of the Blood Hunt, taking down the Sorceress of Death, and Malice in all the confusion also got killed by the Blood Beasts back in the pit fight over here with the Khorngors. My Exalted Bloodthirster just chilling on the back of the battlefield. Just staying alive so that the leadership doesn't fall apart for Khorne. That can oftentimes be the death of yourself in these really close games. It can swing back against you pretty horribly. If your Frenzy starts to go down, your units want to tear out, or they just aren't holding as long. It's pretty gross, but doing a very good job of preserving him there. And that is going to be a game set match scenario. My opponent does throw in the towel. And you can see here, man, Skull Cannons, this was one of the rougher games they had. My opponent was doing a pretty good job of staying on top of them. But they were healing enough damage up on themselves in combat while also regenerating ammunition, still finding opportunities to fire and especially chew on the Harganeth Executioners, keeping them from getting a solid toehold on any objectives, while also chipping at Cold One Knights, running over Harpies. Just such a solid unit, just an excellent option for Khorne, especially in matchups where you can get out valued by your opponent's skirmish forces. The Skull Cannons can counterfire Scourge Runners. They can shoot the Bloodwrack Medusa even. It's a little harder to shoot this than the Scourge Runners, but in a pinch they can also do that. Very good at flipping the momentum of games, honestly. Fleshhounds came in, didn't get all that much done, but the Hounds of the Blood Hunt were really nice. 69 kills. Very nice. Not a lot of value, but they were very healthy. They had plenty left to give, and I had a lot of Blood Beasts on the field, man. Two very healthy units of them at the end. One had already gotten 1,500 value, just beating up on some Cold One Knights with the Khorngors. They finished off Malice, and they found their way onto the Sorceress of Death, who they just absolutely obliterated. Lots of people still bring the Minotaur Great Weapons, I've noticed, but honestly I think that the Blood Beast might be a little bit better, just being 1,100 cheaper. Or not 1,100 cheaper, they cost 1,100, 250 cheaper, with just a similar amount of damage output and potential for damage. They're really good against SEs, honestly incredibly underrated. If they get a surround off on a Lord, or a Caster, or even like the Bloodwrack Medusa, which is ostensibly an anti-large monster, their weapon strength, coupled with decent damage output from their Frenzy and melee attack, is just disgusting. I mean, they will get you so much value. And people are often very prepared for Minotaurs. The problem with Minotaurs is that they're a little bit slower, and they have a little bit less leadership than Blood Beasts. They can be cheesed out a little bit harder, in my opinion. The extra armor is nice in some matchups, and the of course the anti-large bonus is really important in particular matchups, but I think the Blood Beasts might just be better all-rounders. For a cheaper price. And when you've got Khorngors, seriously, just the combo of Blood Beasts and Khorngors together, stacking up the mass on top of the anti-large, you can do some really disgusting damage, and it makes it very hard for your opponent to maneuver around the battlefield, especially when you've got lots of other support tools that can chip your opponent down at range, like the Horsemen and the Skull Cannons, all of which got really good value. And then the Exalted Bloodthirster didn't quite pay for himself, But 2,500 value, especially with all the attention he was getting from Scourge Runners, Malice, and some Spirit Leeches, that's excellent for Khorne. Valkia would not have been able to do nearly as well, I think, here in this particular match. She can really struggle against Cold One Knights, and would not have been able to disengage as cleanly with those very aggressive dives onto the Bloodrack Medusa. That often is the death knell for Valkia. If she gets locked on the ground by Mass, she oftentimes just ends up dying. And Malice is honestly pretty good against Valkia, I find. Exalted Bloodthirster. It was a little bit luck that I had him in my army here, but, you know, trying to show him off. People are really disrespecting this guy. I think he's a lot better than people give him credit for. Just kind of wanting to show that off. Alright. It's going to be enough for this one, guys. Been yapping about it plenty after the fact. I'll catch y'all later. And on the next one. GG's. Peace.